Welcome back to Zak Wealth Files. I'm your host, Zak, and look, my whole mission here is to make wealth building and personal finance simple, completely accurate, and genuinely useful for you. Today, we're diving into a critical explainer on a really costly, kind of hidden error that could literally be sitting right there in your paycheck as we speak. Now, this isn't some crazy story about a terrible investment, a risky bet, or a mistake that requires a PhD in finance to avoid. No, it's just a simple administrative oversight. But as you're going to see, it is one of the absolute largest, most completely avoidable gaps in how most people build their retirement savings.
Okay, there is a really good chance your paycheck has a line on it right now that is quietly costing you somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 by the time you actually retire, right? I know, that sounds like a massive clickbaity claim, but I promise you, this is not a scam, it's not some hidden account fee, and it definitely isn't a market crash. It's simply a checkbox, a single setting that you probably chose exactly once, usually during that crazy rushed first week at a new job, and then literally never touched again. So in this explainer, we're going to look closely at a real pay stub and a 401k statement to show you exactly what you need to check. The whole audit takes about 90 seconds, and the stakes, honestly, couldn't be higher.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Most employers that offer a 401k retirement plan also offer something called an employer match. And in the simplest terms possible, it means this. For every dollar you contribute out of your paycheck, up to a certain limit, your employer actually chips in some additional money too. This is, for all intents and purposes, free money added to your retirement account, right on top of your own cash. Now, a really common structure might look a little something like this. Your employer matches 100% of what you contribute up to 3% of your salary. Or, maybe in other cases, they match 50% of what you contribute up to 6%. The exact numbers vary a ton depending on where you work, which is exactly why so many people get this wrong.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core problem we're talking about. A huge number of people contribute some amount to their 401k, right? But it's often just whatever the default was when they were automatically enrolled. Let's just say that default was a nice, easy round number, like 3%. But wait, what if your employer actually offers a full match up to 5%? Well, if you are only putting in 3%, you are leaving real, guaranteed money on the table every single paycheck for as long as that mismatch continues. You're doing the right thing by investing, but you're just missing out on the full benefits simply because your settings don't line up with your employer's formula.
Let's look at how this plays out on a real, totally anonymized pay stub for someone earning, let's say, $60,000 a year. Their 401k contribution line shows 3% of their salary being deducted every paycheck. But if you look at their plan document, their employer actually offers a match of 100% up to 5% of their salary. So in plain English, this employer is completely willing to match every single dollar this person puts in, up to 5% of that 60 grand salary. That works out to $3,000 a year in potential completely free employer match money. But because our person here is only contributing 3%, they're only getting an employer match on that smaller amount, which is $1,800 a year. The end result? $1,200 a year, every single year, just left entirely unclaimed. And the crazy part? Nobody did anything maliciously wrong here, they just never went back and adjusted that number after it was first set.
Let's see how this builds over an entire career. Because this is where compounding does something that feels almost unfair in how drastically it changes your financial outcome. You can think of compound interest like a snowball rolling down a really, really long hill. If that $1,200 a year had actually been contributed and invested inside the 401k, growing over several decades until retirement, well, historically reasonable long-term stock market growth turns that steady, moderate annual amount into a genuinely massive sum. Over 30 or 40 years, that $1,200 a year can often grow to well over $100,000. And depending on your exact timeline, it sometimes approaches or even exceeds $200,000. So you aren't just missing the $1,200 a year, you are missing everything that money would have compounded into over time.
Now, my crucial point here on this channel is always accuracy. And I want to be very, very clear about something. This is not a guarantee. Investment growth depends entirely on market performance, which is never certain, and past patterns absolutely do not promise future results. The exact final number you get depends heavily on how many years you have left until you retire, what the money is actually invested in, and how the market performs over that specific stretch of time. But look, even using conservative assumptions, missing out on free guaranteed employer match money for years or even decades adds up to an enormous wealth gap.
So this brings up an incredibly obvious question. If this is literally free money sitting on the table, why is this mistake so incredibly common? How do so many smart, hardworking people end up leaving this behind?
Honestly, it really comes down to human behavior and institutional friction. Most of us set our contribution percentage exactly one time. Usually this happens in your very first week at a new job. You know how it is. You're rapidly filling out a giant stack of onboarding paperwork, and you're just doing it without much context on how the specific plan's match actually works. Second, Some plans automatically enroll people at a default rate, like 3%. Why? Simply because it's an easy round number, not because it actually matches what the employer offers. Third, there's this pervasive set and forget mentality. Once that number is locked in, we rarely go back to check it. And finally, some plans actually change their match formula when a new benefits year rolls around, or maybe when you get promoted into a different benefits tier. If you aren't actively checking, you'd literally have no way of knowing your circumstances even changed.
I do also want to note some really important real-world variables here, because personal finance is exactly that. It's personal. Whether you should increase your contribution right now to capture that full match depends entirely on your unique financial situation. You've got to consider your basic emergency fund requirements, any high-interest debt priorities you might be tackling, and just your day-to-day monthly budget. Look, if increasing your contribution means you can't cover essential living expenses, that is a perfectly legitimate reason to hold off or just move gradually. Plus, not every employer even offers a match, and those that do often have vesting schedules. That just means you have to work there a certain number of years before the employer's contributions are fully yours to keep. So always weigh this strategy against your overall financial goals.
Here are your 5 steps to fix this leak. Step 1. Pull up your most recent pay stub and find the exact percentage or dollar amount currently going into your 401k or equivalent account. Step 2. Find your employer's actual match formula. You can look in your benefits portal, your summary plan description, or honestly, just ask HR. Just don't guess. Step 3. Compare those two numbers directly. If your employer matches up to a certain percentage and you are contributing less than that, well, that gap is your unclaimed money. Step 4. If you find a gap and your budget genuinely allows for it, go ahead and adjust your contribution percentage upward to capture that full match. This usually takes like 2 minutes inside your benefits portal. And finally, Step 5. Set an annual calendar reminder to recheck this once a year, especially around raise time or open enrollment, just so your settings never drift out of alignment again.
The gap between contributing enough to get your full match and falling short is easily one of the most avoidable mistakes in wealth building. Fixing it doesn't require picking better investments, it doesn't require timing the market or watching stock charts all day long, it just requires actually checking the number. If this explainer saved you from leaving free money on the table, well, that is exactly why we do this. I want you to go audit your pay stub this week and let me know down in the comments what you find. Seriously, whether your numbers were completely dialed in or if you actually found a leak, I genuinely want to hear about it. Make sure to subscribe to Zak Wealth Files if you want more real, checkable, numbers-first frameworks for building long-term wealth. Because think about it, if a single unchecked box is costing you 6 figures, you really have to ask yourself what other wealth is quietly slipping right through your fingers. I'll see you in the next explainer.